Good morning, upper sixth. Here we are. I've not done any videos for you recently, something about you all doing too many past papers. However, we have some time this morning and I saw this article, and so has our illustrious head of department, who has sent this out to you as well with a load of other topical stuff to do with the global clothing industry. So paper 3 2024, this article I've linked into bullet point 4, but it also links into all the others as well, to be honest with you, especially distribution, which is quite interesting, how Ted Baker is actually just a limited independent company owned by a very big conglomerate. And now Ted Baker don't make anything, they just license the brand to lots of other people. So we shall see how that works out in this question. I've linked this into impact of multinational corporations, which is obviously directly linked to bullet point 4, but also the causes and effect of change. So looking at both of those in this as well. So the article from today's Times, which I've happily borrowed, thank you Times, is as it says there. And we can see that No Ordinary Designer label is actually the company that owns the rights for Ted Baker in the UK and Europe. Okay, slightly different in the United States because that's owned by someone else. We'll see that from the article. So here's the article, and you can pause your video in a second, go through the article, but a couple of things which I thought were really interesting here. We could link this into stakeholders, for example. So we've got the Authentic Brands Group, a parent company that owns Ted Baker, that's a privately owned company that's converted to a licensed business model. Okay, so this is one legal entity, privately owned company. I'm thinking that's an LTD. So they've gone from PLC to LTD because of the 2020 purchase of the Ted Baker brand. Okay, so that's something to take into account if we wanted a forms of business question. So I thought that was very interesting. We can see that this company bought Ted Baker for 211 million in 2022, and it said that actually there was some damage done by the strategic partnership. Now, I'm not quite sure on the form of this strategic partnership, but I was then thinking about joint ventures. And there's economies of scale of joint venture of two organisations getting together to help them grow possibly into Europe, for example. If you dig into this case study through other articles, you'll see that. But actually, when there's a clash of culture and they're not getting on, then we've got a bit of a problem, which has led to other issues which are in this article. Okay, so pause the video. Make sure you also read this bit about comments from Harvey Nicks, because I will use that in the essay that I've set for this. Pause the video now. Did you pause? Don't think so. So, looking quickly at these units, I've lifted this straight out of the Edexcel spec. We've done a lot on impacts of multinational corporations, but remember this could be country as a production location, country as a market, and the ones that we've seen before, when we look back at the Pfizer one, for example, should the Irish government encourage multinational corporations, circular flow of income, macroeconomic goals, all those sorts of things link into the bits that we see on here. But I wanted to bring you to that, back to our original comment of that maybe sort of joint venture partnership that's there. And we've got consumers in there as well. As impact on consumers, well, maybe there's some external factors, which is why I thought it'd be quite nice to revise this one a little bit. And we've got a lovely PESTLE model in there for those external macro factors. And down here, possible effects on stakeholders, which could be the people that are being made redundant possibly when they close the stores in the UK and Europe. It could be the parent company. It could be the company that's come in to help with the administration of the company. It could be just the customers. They could possibly be stakeholders as well, depending how much involvement they've got with the brand. So up here, we've got poor business performance, changes in organisational size. Well, we've seen all of that in this article. New ownership, transformational leadership. Well, they only bought it for 211 million in 2022, and they're already thinking about closing not all of it. So hopefully you read the article and you'll realise that actually the North American business isn't affected, and it says that in the article. So they've transformed the business from a clothing fashion retailer to a licensing individual company. That is totally transformed this, even though the parent company is, I believe, the sole owner of the Ted Baker company. Okay, so we shall see. So PESTLE is a nice question to answer, and in that article there were a number of different things. We've got political linked to legal, because the politicians wanted to stop tax breaks on tax-free shopping. If you think about some of the luxury brands, they've been negatively impacted, and that was that last paragraph from Harvey Nicks. So you need to think about that. The E could be for the economy. We know in the case study it talks about inflation. The question that we're going to look at talks about factors, yeah, as in this one, there's an S on the end of it, which is more than one, which means the essay needs you to talk about more than one factor of PESTLE and not just one, because that would be half the answer, wouldn't it? And possibly half the marks. So looking at the question, we do the normal things. We're going to plan it first, and then we would normally go to the case study. We've done it round the other way here. And I've put a couple of tips down here that you should think about. So what is the hook? So assess how external factors like PESTLE, well, here's my K for my knowledge, might have affected, okay, so might is the beginning of my hook. Ted Baker's financial performance might have affected financial performance and stakeholder relations. So I'm not going to write a 20 marker with this, obviously it's only a 12 marker, but I need to make sure I cover both of these. Now this is quite a mean question. It's a revision question. It's great for you to think about these things. You need to identify any financial information that's in there, be that qualitative comments or quantitative numerical data, and you need to mention the stakeholders and how the relationships may have changed, might have affected, might have changed. This could be for the good, it could be for not so good. Okay, so we are looking for evidence of a company like Ted Baker. Okay, so we're talking about fashion retailer, and we know that they're now a licensing company. So that is possibly, you could talk about that. We've also got knowledge of PESTLE, knowledge of financial, and knowledge of stakeholders. So actually, I'm not going to define all of these things. I'm going to start off with a reasonable contextualised definition of PESTLE. And I'm going to demonstrate an understanding of financial performance and stakeholder relations, or I ain't answering the question. Okay, so moving on. So we're going to start off with a nice definition of PESTLE, or remember, the standards doesn't state you need a definition, but it does state you need to demonstrate knowledge and understanding. So a weak A-level student would be going straight into their answer, and that student might not actually demonstrate any understanding of PESTLE. Welcome to 0 out of 12 and going down a grade boundary. So my advice is start off, and this is everyone's advice by the way, it's not mine, start off with a well-defined contextual start to your answer. Okay, so I decided not to define the whole of PESTLE here because I'm demonstrating an understanding of PESTLE and I'm looking for those factors more than one. So PESTLE elements such as economic challenges highlighted by increased inflation cost pressures, and legal challenges. So we've got two parts of PESTLE, such as the abolition of tax-free shopping, are external conditions that influence the company's strategies and stakeholder relations. Okay, the question is about finance and stakeholders, and we've sort of introduced it there. That's not really going to get any marks. You've just repeated the question, but it does help me as a student to make sure I'm answering the question. Okay, we've got demonstrated understanding of PESTLE. It's in context. I've got a few marks. More importantly, I've got a good foundation, hopefully, for a reasonable answer. So, economic factors have had a substantial impact on Ted Baker's financial performance. At least we know what we're starting with. This includes inflation rates, disposable income levels that will directly affect the retail clothing sales. So this is very much knowledge, bit of context. Retail clothing sales is not in the question, and therefore we're starting to pick up some application. For Ted Baker, rising inflation, this is from the case study, can squeeze profit margins and reduce customer spending, leading to a decline in sales, financial performance. Okay, so we've got some analysis there, and it's contextualised. And because this is a 12 marker, we're really looking for those extended chains of argument. So sometimes using 2 bits of context to extend your chain of argument helps. Your teachers have probably told you need 5 chains of argument. It's not so much how many really, it's what you're doing with them. But you know, we've got a nice chain of argument there, and some of you, if you struggle with time, might actually end there. You've contextualised it, you've got a few chains of argument, you're doing all right, and you're managing your time. You're probably using a 10-mark structure, but who would turn down 10 out of 12, hey? As long as you're finishing the entire paper. The report mentions that Ted Baker has been struggling since the fallout from the exit of the founder, indicating ongoing financial pressures. So up here, we've got a PESTLE factor, and down here we're saying it's been going on for a while. Okay, sort of adds to it a little bit, not hugely, but it's a definitely extended chain of argument. Next line, let's make sure we put our howevers on the next line, because then we'll remember to write them. I like a nice however for my counters, and we know that our 12 markers need to be P, however, A, J, MOPS. Answer the question, justify it in context clearly, and MOPS, future orientated statement to do with one of those factors. We'll get to it in a sec. However, the article also mentioned Ted Baker's initiative to become digital first, which suggests despite the economic downturn, PESTLE factor, the company has sought to capitalise on the growth of e-commerce as counterbalance to inflationary pressures. Okay, not so much a PESTLE factor, but it could be linked into that economic in some ways. It could also be linked into technology. Okay, so we've literally squeezed in a bit of our own research knowledge, and it's in the case study anyway, and we've remembered that T is technology, and that's what it's done. Counter-argument is using another factor of PESTLE. Legal. First thing the examiner reads is we're now going on to a different PESTLE factor, such as tax regulations. This is in context and knowledge, because that's actually part of the case study, can affect a company's sales and profitability. For Ted Baker, the abolition of tax-free shopping, definite application, could deter, chain of argument, international tourists, application, a key customer segment, from making purchases, thus affecting sales and stakeholder confidence. Okay, now at this point, this fictitious student, got to stakeholder confidence. It's in there, and they thought, hang on, I've not contextualised stakeholder confidence. I don't want to write an abstract answer because I'm going to get hammered in the mark scheme if I do. So they've made it absolutely obvious which stakeholders they're talking about. For example, of a stakeholder are the owners of Ted Baker's independent company, Authentic Brand Group, the the case study states that Harvey Nicks has cited the abolition of tax-free shopping, indicating that legal change has broader implications for retailers in the UK, including Ted Baker. It's a bit disjointed, this paragraph, because they've contextualised stakeholders in the middle of it, but then we can see what they mean about the legal implications on that sector. Tourists, so much easier than writing customers, isn't it? More importantly, international ones, because they'll be impacted by the tax-free shopping. Talking context, it takes just as long to write it, and you know, I'm still marking some essays that talk about products and raw materials, and other than it being quite boring, to be honest with you, it's abstract, and you're not going to achieve your predicted grade if you write like that. However, on a separate line, the article also mentions Authentic, which bought Ted Baker, said damage done during the tie-up with another company, too much to overcome, suggesting that legal challenges might not be the sole or even the most significant factor affecting Ted Baker's performance, implying that internal issues may have compounded the legal challenges. Now, stakeholder relations, and it was used as a counter-argument. Okay, so it's not just about this. It might have been that these stakeholder relations have made these legal challenges even worse. Overall, let's answer the question. Let's see. So at this point, we would flick back to our question. We would identify our hooks, which I drew on the previous slide. Obviously, you would only be doing it once. And you would be going, might have affected the financial performance, and I'll put a little circle around that. And this is redoing my plan for you. Wow, that took long, didn't it? No excuses not to do it then. And clearly this is our context with Ted Baker. So we know what our hook is. We go back and we go, oh, that's the hook. On that, let's make sure we've at least answered the question. So overall, the economic and legal aspects of PESTLE, okay, so we've honoured that, have negatively affected Ted Baker's financial performance and stakeholder relations. That we honoured the and. Okay, so it's answered the question. It's not really in context, sort of a rework of this at the moment, but at least it's answered the question. And you're not coming up with something silly that is overall I recommend they focus on, or overall this is the best one. It's about might have affected. Answer the question. Okay, really quite important. I was marking an essay this week, and clearly the student has been revising from TikTok, because every single paragraph and the conclusion ended in increased sales and profits. Unfortunately, that wasn't actually the question, and they didn't do well. So my advice, like every other teacher in the UK at the moment, is do a quick plan, and before you write your first line of your conclusion, make sure you're going to answer it, and make sure that the ends of your chains of argument come back to the hooks in the question. Impact on and on, okay? And then what a lovely word for our sort of justification. And there's lots of different ways of doing this, but you need to make sure that your justification is contextualized. This first line is a repeat, but it answers the question. So we're not really picking up justification marks here. Without the negative impact of these external factors, such as inflation and changes impacting tax-free shopping, maybe Ted Baker would be in a better financial health, and its relations with its new owners might be better, leading to Authentic Brand Group not filing for administration. So we're talking about financial performance and this is considering the alternative. The alternative might be, if it wasn't for those PESTLE factors, things might have worked out, and therefore that £211 million investment might have been better value for money. For MOPS, we need a future-orientated statement. And for this one, I thought we would actually think of a possible thing that might happen. Don't think it will, because of the global reach of the licensing agreement of Ted Baker. I think that one line in the article about licensing sort of restricts this answer, but it's a nice answer. And we've seen this with Superdry in a previous case study we did, if you watched that video. So, if Kelvin, to his friends, were to return and buy back Ted Baker, his objectives might be focused on recapturing the innovative spirit that defined Ted Baker's earlier success. The original founder's expertise could lead to a sharpened strategic vision that uses Ted Baker's core strengths, distinctive design and a quirky brand image, to differentiate it from competitors. It's all contextualised and it's in the future. And then, because there's an allegation of forced hugging, not the best gap year experience I hear from other news articles, but we had to put it in there. Unless the forced hugging has damaged his personal brand too much. Hopefully that's useful. But your question at this point is it perfect? I don't think so. We can always sort of add to stuff, but is it level 4? Because remember, we're not aiming for perfection, are we? We're aiming to finish the paper, the 100 marks of it. We're not going to make silly mistakes on, this is paper 3, so the 8 marker and the 10 marker, they are easy. They're meant to be easy. As long as you've revised, they'll be easy. And if you fall into that time trap, it's these 12 markers that you're going to get stuffed on, because your little insecurity demons will go, oh, I'll quickly skip to the 20 marker. Don't do it. Manage your time. And if you struggle with time, this is not an overly long answer, but some of you won't be able to write this much in the time. Just write a 10-mark structure. Don't bother writing the MOPs. You know, as long as it is accurate and thorough knowledge and understanding supported throughout by relevant uses of business behaviour, that could be a 10-marker. Coherent and logical chains of reasoning showing causes and effect. Well, you know, we've got analytical perspectives are here. If you're doing 5 chains of argument, we're probably here. If you're doing 3, then I'm estimating, just to prove a point, for a conversation really, you might be here. Okay? Assessment is balanced. Well, yeah, a 10-mark structure would be balanced, wouldn't it? Your wide-ranging arguments, well, you're not going to achieve that with a 10-mark structure, depending how you write the 10-marker. So maybe we don't quite achieve that. Is it well contextualised? I blooming hope so. Are you using quant and or qualitative? Well, we've not really used any quant in here, which is a bit disappointing, really. There's a bit in the case study. And shows an awareness of competing arguments. Well, that's why we write our justifications like that, if we've forgotten to put it up here, which we did, by the way. So we've got that competing arguments leading to a supported judgment. Here is your answer, which is then supported by your justification. That's a J. So you imagine if you did this as a 10 marker and you didn't do this, I'm thinking you're probably bottom level 4. 9, maybe 10, depending on the mood of the examiner. Take that to the bank as long as you're completing it. That's a big percentage. 10 out of 12 is, you're going to be up there in the A-star category. So ideally, you can write this sort of thing in the time, and if not, write a 10-mark structure. You'll be all right, as long as you finish the paper and don't mess up the other questions too much. There's the ideal sort of structure that we teach in class. It's up to you if you follow it, really. But this is what your examiner this summer will mark against. Not this or pecan pies or, I don't know, all the other acronyms that are out there. Hopefully that was useful. Good luck with your revision over Easter.